All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We want to keep everybody on time, and we've got a lot to cover in the hour, but we're so thankful that you're here to join us. My name is Allison Toney, and I'm the Director of Student and Alumni Engagement with the Office of Alumni Relations. And before we turn it over to our wonderful presenter, I would just like to go over a few housekeeping items. So we're recording this webinar event, so don't worry if you blinked a little too hard or if you missed something, a recording will be available. And there's also live closed captioning. So to access the closed captioning, the live transcript button is at the bottom of your screen. And once you click that, you can select show subtitles. So if you're having any issues, feel free to ask our VCU Alumni chatbot for assistance. And I would like to thank those that submitted questions prior to the event. For our speaker while registering, we should be answering all of those questions that were submitted. They were provided to our speaker presenter prior to, so hopefully we'll go over those throughout the presentation. But as you can see, we're also in meeting style of Zoom. So we hope this is interactive and engaging. Feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, unmute yourself, and discuss if there's opportunity or engage in the chat. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our presenter, Dr. Jon Singletary, Dean of the Diana R. Garland School of Social Work at Baylor University. Dr. Singletary received his Ph.D. and M.S.W. from the VCU School of Social Work. He was named Dean of the Garland School in 2015 and has developed courses in community practice and social justice with research focus on strengthening congregational community ministries, community development and advocacy, and social justice. Before joining Baylor, Dr. Singletary was a pastor of the Richmond Mennonite Fellowship in Virginia. Before serving as pastor, he worked as a community organizer for an agency providing healthcare to people who are homeless and for a Catholic community settlement house. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Singletary.
Oh my gosh, gladly. Such an honor to be with you all today. I saw Elizabeth Bass, one of my social workers from back in the day. Hi, Elizabeth. If any other social workers are with us today, please share that just so I can know that connection. I loved my time in Richmond. We were there for almost 10 years and still love the relationships I have with faculty and colleagues at VCU over the years. And it's a gift to be able to join you today and to be able to talk about the Enneagram, introduce this unusual resource, and hopefully it will be something that has value for you and your journey and the relationships that matter most in your life. I did receive many questions, phenomenal questions from you, and of course we'll try to I try to incorporate those in my talk. Might not get to all of them, so if you asked a question that I'm not addressing, feel free to add it to the chat. If other questions come up along the way, likewise, just put those in the chat. I'll keep it open and just see if I can follow along. In just a moment, I'm going to share my screen so you can see some notes to guide our talk. And again, just as we're started, just to have you add your number to the chat if you didn't do that. It's helpful for me to see. And again, thank you all so much. So the Enneagram is this phenomenal resource, but strange tool. It's just a symbol. It's just an ancient symbol. How does an ancient symbol have this much meaning and significance for us today is, really something we scratch our heads and aren't just quite sure why it means what it means. It's a symbol of 9 lines, 9 dots around a circle. Ennea is Greek for 9, so that's where the name comes from. It's a symbol of 9. It's a symbol of 9 that Pythagoras used over 2,000 years ago. Pythagoras, of course, is someone we pretty much only know for the Pythagorean theorem of triangles, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But his whole worldview was shaped on that kind of approach, not only to numbers, but to how life worked. To Pythagoras, it wasn't just a statement about mathematics. He was a mathematician and philosopher, but he was a leader of this philosophical community trying to make sense of the world, and patterns and symbols is what they used to understand how the world made sense. And an Enneagram, among other symbols, was just one of those that he said, this shows how on this planet we are connected to each other in these contexts in which we find ourselves. We have relationships to one another that zigzag across, but we are all an individual at the same time. We're an individual and we are part of a community and we are part of this larger sphere. And the Enneagram just gave meaning to that. It wasn't until about 1900 years later, just in the past century, that others began to really add new layers to it. And it was in the middle of the 20th century, the early 1900s, that a Russian philosopher and world traveler, esoteric, named George Gurdjieff found this symbol, traced back some of the secular roots as well as the religious roots, look at what it meant. He looked at what it meant in Sufi, Islamic circles, and early Jewish and Christian history as well, and then began to say, you know, this really can mean something new and different for how we understand ourselves today. So he began to apply modern psychology and philosophy to this ancient religious and diverse symbol. And then he had a group of followers who kept adding new layers. And most recently in the mid to late 20th century, it were two South Americans who really created the Enneagram to be what it is today. Oscar Ichazo and Claudio Naranjo really created the idea of personalities associated with the Enneagram. It was about that time that other personality theories began to be developed. Of course, Jungian philosophy shaped a lot of that with Myers-Briggs. And so there's some similarities between these personality resources. But then there's some distinctives as well. One of the things that is true for the Enneagram and most of these resources is the attention that it pays to how we understand ourselves. The notion of self-awareness and self-reflection is, of course, essential to what the Enneagram means for us. It's tempting for us to use it and explain our family dynamics and run out to our siblings and extended family and give them a number label and tell them what we think about them. I want to discourage you from using the Enneagram that way. Let's not use it to label people, even our most beloved family and friends. Let's try to remember that it is that tool for self-reflection first and foremost. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have great value for family dynamics and other relationships. It does, but people have to understand their number first. They have to want to be interested in being reflective and self-reflective in order for it to have value for their life and their journey. And it really begins with us. If we talk about the meaning it has for us, then others will pay attention and begin to ask questions as well. And you know, that's why in society today, it really has caught on and so many people are talking about it, because they really do see an opportunity to make sense of themselves as well as some of their closest relationships. This idea of self-awareness and self-reflection it's of course something we pay a lot of attention to in social work, but it's true in a lot of professions where you are the instrument that you use to create change. So most of the helping professions have some emphasis on self-awareness. Educators and in the field of education talk a lot about self-awareness as a way to be the best educator. So many fields we know being self-aware matters. But in those fields, including social work, we don't have a lot of tools for how do we become self-aware. We talk about why it's important, but how do you do it? How do you become self-aware? It's something we just leave to people to figure out most often. And the Enneagram is simply a tool that we can use to help people on that journey of becoming more self-aware. It's one of many. There are great resources out there for self-awareness. I just think the Enneagram is one of the better ones. And so I love thinking about what it means, both for its unique history, but also for the just kind of practical understanding that it brings to us today. Self-awareness is key. One of the phrases that is often a part of Enneagram teaching is the idea of non-judgmental self-observation. Non-judgmental self-observation. We live in a society that's really good at judgmental observation. We look around and we're always critiquing things, criticizing things, saying things we don't like. I can't stand that. I really don't like that. That really gets under my skin. I'm glad I'm not like that. Judgmental observation we're pretty good at in our culture. Judgmental self-observation is something we also do pretty well, sadly. We beat up ourselves. We see things in ourselves that we don't like. I can't believe I'm this way. I can't believe I always do that. I should know better. Why do I do this? Why do I do the things I don't want to do? That's an aspect of self-observation, but that sometimes slips into being judgmental when we're harsh on ourselves. And we all need to be a little more kind to ourselves, we know. And the Enneagram really does invite non-judgmental self-observation. And it takes some work to practice that non-judgmental part. It takes some work to see things in yourself from a self-awareness perspective that you might not love or like, but also to hold those lightly, to say, I can be compassionate to myself. I can be gracious to myself. So as a result, the Enneagram really can be a tool for self-compassion. It's a tool for self-awareness, but also self-compassion. And those two really do go hand in hand. One of the things that sets the Enneagram apart from some of the other self-awareness tools is, well, two things. One is that it's a little more well-rounded than some of the tools, and an aspect of it that is holistic. A common tool that we use at Baylor that probably has made its way through VCU and other places where you work and serve is StrengthsFinder. StrengthsFinder is a great resource for self-awareness. It gives you your top 5 strengths. I have mine actually listed on a bulletin board right in front of me. Strategic and ideation, I see at the top of the list. StrengthsFinder is a great tool. StrengthsFinder tends to only focus on those top 5 things that you're good at and suggest that you really play into those. The newest version of StrengthsFinder, thankfully, also provides a bottom 5, something to work on in yourself, something to pay attention to that you need to develop as a new resource for growth. Now with StrengthsFinder, you have to pay extra to get those bottom 5, but I think it's worth it to be able to see your strengths as well as your weaknesses in that kind of objective way. And the Enneagram really does point out those things together. What the Enneagram says is oftentimes those are the same things. It's two sides of the same coin. It can be a great strength that also can be one of your greatest weaknesses. And the reason that is true is because we've learned to see a particular strength that we have. The Enneagram says there are 9 of them. We'll talk about them in just a moment. We each have this great strength, but we don't trust ourselves to have other strengths. So we over-rely on one aspect of our personality. We over-rely on one tool. We over-rely on one strength. You know the analogy, if we have a hammer in our toolbox that we like, then we treat everything in life as though it's a nail. Well, we do that with our personality as well. If you're a 2, you're a helper, and helping is your hammer, and you are trying to be helpful in everyone's life. But not everyone needs you to be helpful all the time. If you're a 5, you're an introspective thinker, and you kind of take great pride in that stepping away ability to observe and make sense of things and catalog and analyze the world around you. And that's a great strength. But sometimes you need the strength of a 2 to step in and relate to people in a meaningful, helpful way. And sometimes a 2 needs that strength of a 5 to be able to quietly reflect and observe. And most 2s don't see 5 characteristics within themselves. And most 5s don't see 2 characteristics within themselves. But a part of what the Enneagram says is we can be that well-rounded. We have access to all 9 types. We can develop all 9 of these strengths and resources. We just over-rely on one. And when we over-rely on one, it really does become problematic. It becomes like an addiction. Claudio Naranjo said as much, that it is truly an addiction of our personality. It's something that becomes engraved within us at an early age, an early childhood, that psychologist said. Engrave is from a Greek word, karaxos, which is the word for character. Character and personality are synonyms. Our character is engraved in us. Our personality is engraved in us in early childhood. So the question of nature, nurture is one we often think about in these conversations. And a large part of the Enneagram is nature. We are born with a large aspect of personality, but then early childhood nurture does shape it. It gets reinforced early on. We kind of test our personality and strengthen it for better or worse, and early adolescence, and then young adulthood, you kind of are at the height of these characteristics of your personality. Again, for better or worse. That's when, it's your early 20s where the 2s are the most helpful, and the 5s are the most introspective, and the 8s are the greatest challenging leaders, and all the other types we'll talk about. It's usually kind of past young adulthood, early adulthood, and middle adulthood that we begin to realize that tool doesn't always work for me. I really need other tools in my toolbox. Middle adulthood, we become a little more balanced and well-rounded. And then sometimes we forget which of those tools most shaped me. And that's when self-awareness becomes even more important. The Enneagram really does teach that one of the 9 types is true for you. That in early childhood and by adolescence, your personality was pretty solidly shaped. And now it's just the journey of making sense in this self-reflective, self-aware way. Which of these is most true for me? Which of these 9 distinct types is most true for how I understand myself and how I think I operate in the world? And I hope that in our time today, you're able to be able to discern, to make sense of which of these 9 types is most true for you. Maybe you'll see some connections between a type that is yours and some of the other lines that you connect to on the Enneagram. I'll present the image in just a moment, and you'll see that because of the way the lines crisscross, each type is connected to 2 other types with these arrows. And those arrows just point to 2 other numbers that we often draw from in our personality. And we draw from them because they give us balance. I'm a 3, I'm connected to 6 and 9. 3s are people on the go, always have something to do, always have something to accomplish, always have something to prove. The downside of our personality, and everyone has one, is that we've convinced ourselves that we only have value for what we accomplish. We are people pleasers because we want to convince people to love us by what we accomplish for them. And 3s have to learn that we are loved no matter what. We are not loved just for what we accomplish. We are not loved because we are successful achievers. We can be loved simply for who we are as beloved creation. But it's hard for us to believe that because we have learned, me over 50 years, that I'm loved because I get things done for people. Well, it was pretty early on in my marriage that I realized, okay, my wife doesn't love me for what I accomplished for her. But I still have to tell myself that every day. Jon, you don't have to prove yourself. And it's the lines I connect to that remind me of that. As a 3, I connect to 9. And that's a number that helps me know to slow down. There's value in just slowing down. 9s are really good at slowing down. Now, 9s need the line to 3 because it's the 3 that encourages them to speed up. So depending on personality, we all need that little bit of a corrective. The 6 is the part of my personality that tells me it's important to make loyal connections. So we need these other numbers to balance us. So we are one core number, but we do connect and draw from other numbers. 2 other numbers that we connect to, and then I will get into the description of the 9 types, I promise. But 2 other numbers that we connect to are the numbers on either side of our core number. And those we often call the wings. Someone asked about the wings. You can't be a 3 with a 7 wing. It just doesn't work that way. On either side of a 3 is a 2 or a 4, right? So the wings I have are 2 and a 4. So those numbers also rub off on me a little bit. So as a 3, I have characteristics of a 2 and a 4, and I have characteristics of a 6 and a 9 to give me some balance. But at my heart, I'm a 3. It's kind of like a transmission in an automobile. I spend most of the time in my car in drive. That's the gear that shapes me most as I'm making my way down the highway. And as I make my way through life, it's the 3 part of my personality that shapes me the most. But I need reverse in my car. I need neutral in my car. I need park in my car. Sometimes I need low gear. In my personality, I need 2 and 4. I need 6 and 9. We all need a little bit of these other types to give us balance. But in order to figure out all those other things, you do have to figure out at your core, which is your type. And the test can help us do that. I don't over rely on the test. I don't do a workshop just based on test results. Because unlike StrengthsFinder, where there's one test approved by the Gallup Corporation. The Enneagram is older than any corporation, so no one owns it. And there's not one official certified Enneagram test. There is an Enneagram Institute. They have a great website. EnneagramInstitute.com is the first place I'll send you for more information. And they have their own test that you can take. You'll find it on their website. We suggested the Truity test. IEQ 9 is an Enneagram test. There's an Ennea app that actually is a pretty good test. You can download Ennea app, and it has a test and some other resources available. But each of these tests are designed in such a way that they should give you the same result, but they don't always. It's hard for a test to tell you what your personality is. You know your personality, but you only know it if you spend time looking at it. If you spend time in self-awareness, you will know yourself. Spending 15 minutes on a personality test will give you some hints about yourself, but it won't give you the full picture. So pay attention to what the test says, but then read some results and spend some time in self-reflection and see if what I share in the workshop today matches what you saw in your test results before you just believe, well, the test said I'm a 4, so I must be a 4. Well, sometimes the test gets it wrong, depending on how we were feeling the day we took it, depending on what we ate before we took the test, all those things we know. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. I'm still looking at the chat to see if people add questions. Feel free to do so. But I'll share my screen with an image of the Enneagram and we'll go from there. Here it is. I zoomed in just enough for you to be able to see the symbol. You might not be able to read all the words all the way around it. I'll try to zoom in a little bit as we go. But here is this ancient symbol, this circle with 9 crisscrossing lines connecting 9 dots. And each of the dots around the circle really does represent a personality type. The way we often teach the Enneagram, the way we learn about the Enneagram is really rooted in 3 characteristics of personality. And these characteristics show up in a lot of personality theories, and they're the characteristics of feeling and thinking and doing. Feeling and thinking and doing. We're all feelers. Some of us might know I'm more of a feeler than a doer, or I'm more of a doer than a thinker. And we all have to kind of ask ourselves, is it possible for us to make sense of the extent to which I'm a feeler or a thinker or a doer? I'll zoom in just a moment and make the words a little more clear. Yeah, so hopefully that'll become a little more clear as we go. This feeling, thinking, and doing part really is what shapes how we begin to understand which of the numbers is probably most true for us, because the 9 types are broken down in those 3 categories. So I'll zoom in first to look at 3 numbers that are most feeling oriented. And then we'll look at 3 numbers that are most thinking oriented and 3 that are most doing oriented. Well, I thought zooming in would help. It's really not. Let me see if I can take just a second. When I take it out of Prezi and put it in PDF, sometimes it just does that. I'll read most of this to you if you're not able to read it clearly. I think that size is about the best we can get, and I'll just read this to you. And we'll focus on 3 parts at a time. So here is this kind of bottom third of the Enneagram, and you'll see the 2, 3, and 4 there. The 2, 3, and 4 you see in the big yellow word, hopefully you can read that, the heart-oriented numbers, just underneath that feeling. These are the feeling types of the Enneagram. And these numbers are most driven by a desire to make sense of the relationships in their life. Relationships matter more to these numbers than any other type. They're really driven by feelings, and feelings are how we connect to other people. And when you're driven by feelings and you want relationships to work, then you care a lot about relationships, but relationships don't always go the way we want them to. And when you struggle that much at the core of who you are to make relationships work, and relationships sometimes go sour and don't work, it's easy for these numbers to carry a sense of shame. So our core emotional struggle that's often true for these three numbers is they're wrestling with shame. Of course, all 9 types can experience shame, but it's just under the surface a little bit more for these 3 types. We'll see a similar characteristic for each of the other 2 groups of 3. This triad, this feeling triad, what we'll see here is kind of a spectrum in terms of how they engage their feeling core, their shame core. So they use feelings differently. The 2, 3, and the 4 all approach feelings and therefore relationships differently. And it's a spectrum from being more externally focused to being more internally focused. The 2, the first number in this group of 3, is more externally focused on other people's feelings. A 2 is more externally focused on other people's feelings. A 2 is going to know and remember people's names. They'll know the names of everybody in the office, and they'll probably know the loved ones of everybody in the office. They'll remember birthdays of people in the office. They're always the person who's going to stop in during the day and ask you how you're doing. And then they're going to remember how you're doing, and they're going to come back the next week and say, are you feeling better? Last time we talked, you were wrestling with this. 2s really connect to other people's feelings. And as a result, we often label them the helper, or here it also says the giver. So the first line there is giver or helper. And 2s are known more for connecting to other people and taking care of the needs of others. And it's difficult for them to stop and be as attentive to their own needs. 2s are much more inclined to ask someone else how they're feeling, to ask someone else what they need. And if someone stops and asks a 2, well, what do you need? They're almost automatically going to say, oh, I'm fine, I'm good, I don't need anything. But tell me about you. They're going to turn the conversation back to you. And that struggle that a 2 has, that downfall of a 2, is what Claudio Naranjo described as the passion of pride. So the next line there under 2 says passion of pride. And it's because they have this deep desire to give and receive love. The third line. It's what motivates each type that helps you know if that might be your number. A lot of us are helpful or helpers. A lot of us are helpful. A lot of us are givers. If we just had to sign up for that, most people would sign up to be a 2 because we all want to be a helper. Okay, not everybody, but a lot of us want to be helpful. But it's not being helpful that helps you know whether or not you're a 2. It's that desire to give and really receive love. And that desire is something that you cannot shake. We all want that, but that is what motivates a 2 deeply at their core. So across from the 2 is the 4. We're going to skip the 3 for a moment. The 4 is the internal feeler. If the 2 is focused on other people's feelings, the 4 is focused on their own feelings deeply. 4s are known for their emotional awareness, their emotional intensity. 4s are described on that first line as romantics or individualists. They're known as romantics because of that inner emotional journey that they have. And as individualists, because they really want to make sure that they are as attuned to their emotions as possible in order to be able to engage others in a meaningful way. They think they can only be of value in a relationship if they can figure out how to be authentic and honest about what they're feeling all the time. And 4s are just always kind of lost in the world of their emotions. So twos love to talk to fours because fours can talk about themselves and twos don't want to talk about themselves. So you see the difference there? Twos are focused on other people's feelings. Fours are really focused on their own. The passion there that's hard to read is envy. The passion of envy is what motivates fours. And it's not that they're jealous of your things, they're jealous of how content other people seem to be in the world. Other people just seem to have a balanced emotional state, and fours are envious of that. Fours cannot find a way off of their emotional roller coaster. They're up one moment and down the next and just can't figure out balance in life. And they look around and other people seem to be balanced. Other people seem to be happy and relaxed. And fours just need to find themselves and how they operate, and that desire to understand themselves, that desire to have significance within themselves is that distinct desire of the four that sets them apart. With twos focused on other people's feelings and fours deeply focused on their own, the threes are in between, and the middle number of each triad, the middle number of each group, is really the most disconnected from this aspect. The threes want to understand their emotional life, but they just can't. We are just kind of at a loss sometimes when it comes to emotions. And so we function as doers. I mentioned earlier, threes are successful achievers. We've forgotten that we are a feeling number and we've turned ourselves into doers, but we do things because we worry about how people feel about us. We don't do things just because we like to be busy. We do things because we think that is what will win approval. We do things because that is what we think will make us matter in a relationship. Twos, threes, and fours all worry, fret day in, day out about connection and relationship. Twos are trying to fulfill relationships by meeting other people's needs. Fours by understanding themselves and who they are so they can bring their best self to a relationship. Threes, if I just can show you how valuable I am, you'll love me. If I can just accomplish these things on life's journey, you'll love me. And that passion for threes is deceit. They're not trying to lie to you. They're just kind of deceiving themselves by doing whatever you ask of them in order to win your approval. So we take on whatever task is needed of us, and it's hard for us to be discerning about, is this mine to do or not? I'll just do whatever people want me to do because that's what it takes to be loved. And that's not true to myself. It's hard for twos to set boundaries in relationships, and it's hard for threes to set boundaries on tasks. So threes end up being multitaskers who are overcommitted, way too many things on our to-do list, and it's deceitful. And we honestly have no idea how to be true to ourselves. I see that comment in all caps. What does it mean to be true to yourself? It's something we all wrestle with, but a four wants to know from the perspective of feelings. A two wants to know because I'm afraid I'll lose relationships, and a three wants to know because I'm so busy doing things for other people, I don't know what is mine to do. And sometimes you'll hear in this presentation something that does make you a little uncomfortable, makes you squirm a little bit, makes you maybe even feel attacked, someone added to the chat. Yes, sometimes that's when you know your number, is when you hear something that says, oh, how did somebody know that about me? That three is that desire to feel valuable is what they're chasing after. I spend too much of my life chasing after a desire to feel valuable. Twos, threes, and fours, feeling numbers, all trying to connect at a heart level, but struggling to do so in a meaningful way. All right, we're shifting over to this next group of three. Here are the head numbers. If you're tired of hearing me talk about touchy-feely things, then you're in the right space now. The touchy-feely numbers are a little bit more the 2, 3, and the 4. The 5, 6, and 7 numbers are the head numbers. Fives are the true internal thinkers, observers or investigators, watching the world around them, taking it all in. So there's a similar spectrum here from internal to external, and the 5s are the internal thinkers. I'm looking around at the world, but I'm taking it all into myself. And I'm not going to share it with anyone else. I'm kind of greedy with information. I'm taking it in, I'm kind of hoarding information. So the passion for the 5 is avarice or greed. They're not greedy for your car. They're not greedy for more food, more money. They're greedy for knowledge, for understanding, for awareness. That's what they think is needed to make the world work. That's what they think is needed for them to be functional in the world. And 5s are afraid that if I don't know the right thing, I'm not going to be able to do what is required of me. It's that desire to be competent or capable that drives a 5. And the only way they know to be competent and capable is to know more. I need to know more in order to function in the world. And I know more by understanding things. So it is head information, head knowledge that a 5 needs. And if I don't know enough, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I won't be functional. So here we're going to see that these 3 numbers wrestle with fear, just like the first 3 wrestled with shame. We're going to skip the 6, move over to the 7. The 5 is the internal thinker. The 7 is the external thinker, thinking out loud, sharing big ideas. I have a great idea. We ought to try this. Have you considered this? 7s are adventurous. They're still thinkers, but they're always thinking about how to find the happy side of life. 7s are epicures, meaning collectors of great opportunities and adventures, or they're enthusiasts. They're always enthusiastic about their new opportunity in life that they have, a new adventure or a new job or a new career. A friend of mine who's a 7 says, 7s don't just change jobs, they change careers. They always want something new and completely different. And this friend started out in business and then ended up in home construction and then went into ministry and now runs a nonprofit farm. That is a person looking for adventure in life. 7s are enthusiasts, but their passion is gluttony, always wanting more and more and more and not knowing what it takes to just be content with where they are in life. So that desire to be content is difficult for 7s. They are just afraid they won't be content in life without more of something. What does it take in order to be content? And then in the middle of that, the introverted thinker is the 5 and the extroverted thinking out loud person is the 6. The thinking out loud is the 7. In the middle is the 6 who's just not sure what to think. The 6 is kind of overwhelmed by all the ideas. The 6 is who we most associate with fear or anxiety. 6s are thinking all the time, so they are truly in this thinking group, always thinking about a way out, a safety plan, how to be secure, but never quite trusting themselves, never quite knowing if they have the right plan, never quite knowing if they have enough resources, always planning for the worst case scenario, but always afraid they don't have the right plan for the next big problem that might come their way. 6s are questioners because they don't trust themselves. They often don't trust other people. They ask a lot of questions trying to figure out, do they know the right information? Do they know what is needed? But they don't trust others just like they don't trust themselves. And they're also loyalists. They value the connections they have. They value the safety they feel with people where they can ask these questions. So they might not always trust your response, but they do want you in their life because they do rely on you for that connection. So they are loyal questioners with this passion of fear and a desire to have guidance. a desire to have support that they can trust. Someone mentioned sixes were prepared for the pandemic. I heard that over and over again. Sixes are trying to be prepared for a worst case scenario. And that worst case scenario was coronavirus. And sixes were like, I've been preparing for this. But how do we know when it's over? How do we know when it's safe to go back on the world? How do we know which vaccine is best and to get it or not to get it? Takes them back to that place of fear. Sixes always find themselves back to that struggle. These are the thinkers. These are the head numbers. And they want to understand the world, but you can't always understand the world around you. And when you can't understand it, but you desire that knowledge, fear is what shapes your life. So just like shame was at the core for the first three, fear was at the core for the second three. And here, this last group of three, we'll talk about anger being a core struggle. These are body-oriented numbers or doing numbers, people who know how to get things done. Eights are notorious for knowing how to get things done. I said my threes are pretty productive people, but threes are doing things in order to feel loved. That's what makes us deceitful. Eights are doing things because no one else is doing it, and it's got to get done. And there's a big world out there with lots of challenges, and we're here to take them on. And sometimes taking them on creates conflict, and eights are like, fine, bring it on. Conflict is just part of life. It's a part of what it takes to be able to make the world go round. Eights are bosses or challengers. You'll see there the passion of lust. It's oriented to that body perspective that shapes these numbers. They trust their gut, but they trust it to a fault. Sometimes they have to learn to trust other feelings. They often say, I just have a feeling about this. Well, that's not the same thing as being emotionally aware and being tuned into other people's feelings. Eights only trust their gut, only trust their body to guide them. And that passion of lust is just that need to be in control of all things. Challenging all things and being in control of all things works a lot of the time for eights, but not always. I'm a three married to an eight, so I get to live this connection up close. Two of our teenagers also happen to be eights. There's a lot of energy in our household, to say the least. They have this desire to be in control of their lives. You see there at the bottom of the notes for the eight. The eights want to be in control of their life. They want to do the right thing. They're willing to take on anything in life in order to be productive. Across the spectrum, from this external doer, the eight is the one, the internal doer. Ones are still getting things done. Ones are still accomplishers in the world, but they're focused on doing the right thing, driven by this internal compass that is always making them worry about if they're doing the right thing, if they're doing it correctly, if they're doing it thoroughly enough, if they're doing it perfect. Oftentimes we call ones perfectionists. I use the label reformer there at the top of the notes, reformer instead of perfectionist, because a lot of ones don't think of themselves as being perfect. They would like to be perfect, but they think that's an unrealistic ideal, but they're going to keep striving for it. There's always something in life that can be improved upon, though. And that's what makes a one, a reformer. Their deep desire is to be good. They are afraid of making mistakes. And there is an internal voice always critiquing them, always saying, have you done enough? Have you done it right? You should have done more. You should have done that differently. And it's hard for ones to know how to turn that voice off. Their gut is always driving them to do what is good and right. And that can be a great gift, but it can also be that curse. And it makes them frustrated. Ones don't often think of themselves as being angry, but they often understand what it means to be frustrated with themselves and frustrated with others when we don't measure up. But that is a form of anger. Sometimes it's passive aggressive. Sometimes it's anger that gets stored up and bubbles out when they least expect it or desire it, because they're trying to repress anger because anger is not a good thing. One's always trying to do what is right. Eight's always trying to do more and more in life. In the middle there of these two numbers is the 9. And the 9 is just saying, can't we just slow down? Can't we just kind of ponder this a while? Do we have to do it now? Isn't there a way to see both sides of this? That's the peacemaker that is the 9, or the mediator. 9s aren't necessarily active trying to create peace, though. They're really trying to avoid conflict. Their deep desire is harmony, balance in life, peace. And they're afraid of anything that's going to disrupt their peace. They want to be in charge of their life, just like an 8 and a 1. So all of these numbers desire control, but the control a 9 wants is to do it on their own time frame. I'm going to do it later. Try to make me do it now. It's not going to work. A 9 is in control of their time frame and their perspective. And because they're not doing things right now when we think they need to do it, sometimes we look at 9s and think they're lazy. But they're not lazy. Their passion is the passion of sloth. It's more than just a fancy word for lazy. It's just kind of a slow, intentional way of doing things. 9s ponder as a part of being active. And we can think about slothfulness like the animal, always climbing down out of that tree slowly. 9s just do things their own pace, but they want to be in control of their pace. And when you try to rush them, it also makes them angry. These numbers want to be in charge of their life more than anything. And when they're not, anger is a common emotional struggle for these 3 numbers, the 8, the 9, and the 1. All right, that's my quick tour of the Enneagram. It gives everybody a sense of the labels of the numbers, but I don't like to just highlight the labels because we need to understand more about what motivates us. And it's that passion, it's that desire that really makes us who we are in our number, more than that label. It's not the one word label, it's that motivating factor. Hopefully there's something in this that gives you a sense of how you can understand what number is most truly yours. And if not, that's where a test can be helpful. What I often tell people is at least take some time to rule out some of the numbers that you think are probably most certainly not you. I mentioned earlier, I know I'm not a 5. I'm not that deep of a thinker. I'm not that methodical when it comes to needing information. I like to read, but I'm not driven by that desire for more knowledge and information. And I'm not worried about being afraid when I don't have it. I'm also know I'm not a 1. 1s are active, but I'm not all that worried about doing things the right way. I just want to get a lot done. So 1s don't like shortcuts. 3s don't mind shortcuts. 1s want to do it thoroughly, singular task, one thing at a time. 3s are multitaskers. So rule out some numbers that might not be true for you, and maybe that can help you figure out at least 2 or 3 that are most likely you. Compare that to the test results. And then the Enneagram Institute.com really is a great website where you can click on any of the 9 numbers and it gives you 2 or 3 pages of notes with more information about that particular number. I have a website, it's just my name, JonSingletary.com. It has this Prezi on it. So if you want to be able to access the Prezi in a readable format, click on it there. It's much more clear. And it's the same notes there on my website with a little bit more information about the Enneagram and a way to reach out and contact me. I'm just looking here at some of the notes in the chat for questions. Sarah and Allison, if you noticed any particular that you think I should focus on, feel free to jump in. We have a few minutes left and I'll try to make my way through some of these.
I saw one. Thank you so much, Jon. This has been great. One that said, to what degree should we build or plan our lives, careers, etc., around our
I did see that. Yeah. You know, that's a part of that self-awareness and self-reflection. I'm not someone who says that certain careers are best for certain numbers. I've seen numbers of all types thrive in all kinds of different professions. And I've done Enneagram work for 12 years now. And I've seen couples of all types work. I've seen parenting relationships of all types work. And I've seen people in careers of all types work. I'm a social worker. A lot of social workers are twos. When you know you're a helper, you might know you want to help others professionally. That doesn't mean social workers make the best twos. Again, because sometimes your strength is your greatest weakness, it can be really hard for the twos who are social workers to set boundaries. It can be hard for them to say, I know that I have to set limits to how I can help you. Sometimes a less extroverted feeling type can make a better social worker. So it can be a helpful resource in career choices and vocational discernment, but I would not limit, and I really don't emphasize the kind of tools that say, if this is your number, this is the kind of best career path for you. I think whatever career path you're on, wherever you found yourself, there's still something you can use in Enneagram to learn about yourself and how you function in that role. I often use the feeling, thinking, and doing as a way to help us better thrive in our roles. So I do a workshop we talked about, maybe we'll do it as a follow-up, on leadership, where you really pay attention to how do I develop, if I know I'm a feeler, how do I develop my thinking characteristics in order to be the best leader I can be? If I know I'm not as good at it at getting things done, how do I develop that doing part of myself? So developing balance is something we all need, regardless of what career we found ourselves in. There's a book called 9 Types of Leadership. If you want a great resource, that's a book worth looking up, 9 Types of Leadership.
If anyone has other questions, feel free to, if you feel comfortable, jump off, mute, or drop them in the chat.
I see people talking about podcasts. I'll say my mentor in Enneagram work has been Suzanne Stabile. Suzanne has written a couple of books. The Road Back to You is her first one with co-author Ian Cron. And then she wrote a book on the Enneagram and relationships called The Path Between Us. The Path Between Us is her second book. It's actually a better book. It's a little bit shorter. It has better stories in it. She's a great storyteller. So if you're looking for stories of, practically, what does this look like in a person's life? She gives great stories of herself as a 2, and she mentions me as a 3 in her book. She talks about my wife a little bit as an 8. She talks about different people who are each of the 9 numbers and just tells a little bit about their stories. Suzanne Stabile, The Path Between Us. And then she has a podcast that's just called The Enneagram Journey. And she's done it for 2 or 3 years now, and she just interviews people of different types. So if you think you might be a 6, listen to her podcasts on 6s and see what you can learn from other 6s. Sometimes she'll do a podcast where she'll interview a 5, 6, and a 7. And that's a great way to kind of tease out, if you're not sure if you're a 6 or a 7, listen to her interview a 6 and a 7 and see which one feels more like you.
Someone did ask too about the connection with the Myers-Briggs.
Yes, I saw that. So there are some websites that are helpful for that. There's not an exact one-to-one correlation. I tell people to just pay attention to both and what those mean for you. So you notice I didn't talk about introversion and extroversion explicitly as a part of Enneagram, although I did talk about being more externally focused or internally focused. And that is similar to introvert extrovert as Myers-Briggs. I did talk about thinking and feeling, which is one of the other categories in Myers-Briggs. So that is something that's more of a common correlation between the two. So look at some of those characteristics and see if you see a connection there. I see that Deborah posted, she's an INTJ. So that means you're an introverted thinker. What Enneagram types are introverted thinkers? Well, you mentioned 4 is one of your possibilities. 4s are introverted feelers, but you still could be an IT in Myers-Briggs. 5s are truly introverted thinkers. That's the most obvious connection. Eights, you tested as an 8, possibly. Eights have a line that connects to 5. That means eights have a lot of characteristics that are very 5-ish. And eights are often introverted and are often thinking dominant. So an 8 could truly be an INTJ.
A couple of questions about the wings. What does it mean to have your wings balanced?
Yeah, sometimes you'll see Enneagram writers talk about having more of one wing or the other. And that's most often true for us because the Enneagram really is a circle more than it is just 9 points. Sometimes you lean a little bit more in one direction. So I'm a 3 who leans a little bit more towards 2. So I describe myself as a 3 with a 2 wing. Not everybody knows their wing, so that maybe means you're already balanced. I have a friend who is a 2 who has taught the Enneagram and done work with it as long as I have. And she never knows if her wings are 1 or 3. Because a lot of times she sees 1 characteristics and a lot of times she sees 3 characteristics. So some of us have a more obvious wing than another. And some of us have parts of life where we lean in one direction, parts where we lean in another. My wife, the 8, was much more of a 7 wing in her younger years. A lot more of that enthusiastic energy, life of the party, but always in charge of the party, kind of an 8. And now she has a stronger 9 wing. Maybe it's having 5 teenagers that did that to her, but as an 8, she still wants to be in charge of things, but she has a lot more of that 9, let's just kind of go with the flow kind of energy, but still don't cross her. She's still the boss. So wings do vary a little bit for different people.
And we had one more question. I think some of the 3s out there are still feeling a little bit
Oh yeah.
regarding to the context of deceit,
Yes.
and if that
Yes.
has any correlation to imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome is interesting. I have a 2 in my office who is talking to me about imposter syndrome quite often. As a 2, she feels it because she so wants to connect to people that she's worried about is she being authentic in her relationships. As a 3, I just think I can do anything. I've convinced myself I can, if there's a task to be done, I can find a way to accomplish it, particularly if you think that's what will make me look good, look valuable. I have that desire to feel valuable. So I'm going to go to great lengths to win at any game, to accomplish any task, to do what it takes to be successful. Is that imposter syndrome? I don't know. I don't worry about being an imposter. I've just convinced myself I can do things. But it does make me deceitful because, come on, I can't do everything. Who am I kidding? Only myself. And that's often true with that passion of our number. It's something that hurts us ourselves more than hurts other people. I'm not out actively lying to people, but I have deceived myself into thinking I can do things that I have no business doing. And sometimes I'll get in the middle of a task and think, why did I take this on? How do I get out of this? And that's deceit. Learning how to say yes to the right tasks is what we need to be able to do as a 3. Great question.
Yeah, these are some great questions, and I know we're getting right to time, but I really appreciate you taking the time from your day to be with us. This has been awesome. I've really enjoyed it, learned a lot about myself and others, and thinking about how we can apply this more to our own teams that we work with in professional and personal lives. So my colleague dropped feedback in the chat. We would love your feedback. Someone had asked about resources. We have been collecting all the resources that Jon mentioned, and then some of you all also posting in the chat. So we'll make sure to send that out in a follow-up email. And then we are doing a Instagram takeover this Thursday. Our next event is with Charm City Books, an alumni who owns a bookstore, and he's going to be offering some suggestions for summer reading. So thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you at the next alumni event. And thank you, Jon, again, and we will follow up with more information. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this.